Okay, welcome back, everybody. We just saw the year 6 reveal with the roadmap, all kinds of information in there, and we have two lovely gentlemen in front of us here that we are going to be able to ask about that can give us some inside knowledge, and we're really excited to do that. So I guess let's start with maybe the new operator, Flores. What would you like to go into with Flores? He looks very interesting, to say the least.
I think he leads to really fun gameplay moments. At least at my level, I cannot count in PlayStations how many times I've run away screaming super with a very high pitch and just trying to get away and save my life. I find him pretty fun to play as and pretty fun to play against. And usually for me, that's a sign of a good
Yeah,
operator.
I know too. On the story side, we really want to add some variety in our characters. So getting like this master thief joining the team with a really unique ability, is a nice kind of break for us to inject somebody as like colorful as Flores. So it's a lot of fun to work on a character like that.
And on the balancing side, the gadget kind of works like a normal drone in terms of interaction with the defender abilities, right? So electrified, barbed wire, walls, stuff like that will destroy it. Mute jammers
Indeed.
will stop it. You can shoot it in the non-armored phase, and once it's
Absolutely.
armored, it's only explosives that can stop
Correct.
it. Yeah, damage wise, how much does it do when it detonates?
It kills you. Whichever, like if you're inside the zone and you take full damage, it kills you. Whichever armor you have, like there's no getting out of it. But keep in mind that you have a lot of time to get out. Like there's a very clear warning. And contrarily to a frag grenade, you cannot cook it, so you're always gonna get the 3-second warning. Then of course, if you're a bit slow to the reaction, if you're I don't know if Flores caught you while you were looking at your observation tool, that like those can be situations where you don't feel like you have that much time to get out. But if you're being careful, like fundamentally, it's supposed to be much more efficient at destroying the utilities and the defenses than really killing someone. You should only get caught if you're really not paying
It's
attention.
really interesting that you mentioned that, because I think a lot of times what we've seen with other operators, and probably with this one, is that what jumps out is, oh my gosh, he's got a car that can blow up and kill people. But the way that they actually play out in game doesn't necessarily work like that. And before we went live here, we were talking, and you mentioned that using that car to clear utility might be how you see it used a lot more often than actually going after somebody to get kills. So that was kind of comforting to me, because I'm sure, just like a lot of people watching, we see that and we're like, oh boy, here we go. I'm going to die because somebody's going to drive a car behind me and kill me. But it's not really how that is going to work out in game most of the time.
Most of the time. The thing is, you can end up dying because of the explosion, simply because the attacking team coordinated really well around the explosion. Like typically on border, if you're pushing upstairs against a half wall and you want to get that Jaeger out of a half wall, it's super efficient to just get him out. You can already do that with other things, right? You can do that with a frag grenade. You can do that, but here, like if you catch the guy and he's gonna get out, it's possible that he dies from the explosion simply because there were so many like shots going out that he didn't dare going out or something like that. It could still happen.
I can't wait to see the first ace with the gadget only.
That's a tough one. That's a real tough one.
I mean, there was so much big information in that reveal and the roadmap. I think the next thing that really drew my interest had to do with the attacker repick and how the preparation phase is going to be changing. That looks like it has the potential to be one of the most significant changes we've ever seen in this game. So can we go into that a little bit?
Yeah, of course. And I agree with your statement. I definitely think it's one of the biggest changes we've ever seen in Siege.
Being able to choose your operator after you've droned out the defense and seeing what operations they have is going to give you a little bit of an advantage as an attacker to be able to make your team composition based off of what you're seeing. But what was the real goal for making this change? Like, why did you say we need to do this?
So there's a bunch of high-level objectives we were pursuing. One of them to keep in mind as a context is that right now it's easier to defend than attack. So we're very comfortable with that in mind to build a feature that fundamentally is something that favors attackers. the thing is, when building this feature, we're pretty convinced that what we're doing is building a flow that should always have been there. That's just a lot more natural, because as a defender, you have a natural advantage, which is that you're on the ground before the attacking team. So the space is yours. And you have a lot of time to prepare before they come. You have a lot of time to think about what you're going to do. And the logical thing for the asymmetrical flow, that Rainbow has always had, should have always been for attackers to be able to adapt to that, to use this information that they get during the preparation phase, and to have an adaptation of their composition. And if you think about it, it's exactly what you were doing in the old Rainbow Six, when you were doing this sort of planning phase where you were seeing the floor maps and you were getting intel on what was in, and then you were building your team to try to adapt to this. That was already in the old Rainbows from the start. So we're just getting back to Rainbow's roots here, and I think we're making it more natural. And then more concretely, also another goal that we're pursuing is that I think it's pretty clear that during the prep phase, as a defender, you have a lot to do. You have rotation holes, you have your whole setup to do. But as an attacker, because we didn't really make this flow from the get-go, we always had this feeling of, okay, the preparation phase feels too long as an attacker because I don't have that much to do, but we can't really make it shorter, because if we do, then defenders have an even bigger problem preparing for the attacking phase. So I think by doing this change, we're fixing a fundamental issue of how the rounds work in Siege.
So from a technical thing, stuff like Twitch would concern me straight off the bat. I can't spawn in on a Twitch drone in the prep phase and drone around and sap things and then decide to change to another operator. I get a normal drone no matter who I am, right?
Yes, very much so.
So
you're going to get a normal drone, yeah. Because with this new way of looking at the round structure, we cannot consider that you committed on a pick in attack before we start the action phase and we spawn you. So up until the very end of the preparation phase, we have to consider that you haven't picked an operator yet. You might have pre-selected an operator, but we don't know yet what your choice is. So we have to assume that we don't know what it is, and we have to only spawn you during the prep phase with a normal drone.
6-pick and reveal. How is that going to work with this?
So we still need to look at the all the details and the different match formats that we have in different contexts, Pro League, in the different playlists and everything. But it's very likely that some of these things will disappear. So the reveal typically and the 6-pick, I'm not sure they make a lot of sense in that context.
Let's talk about some maps now. Okay, so we've got in the roadmap, we've got the 3 reworks that we're getting in year 6. We're going to be getting a border rework. We're going to be getting an outback rework and a favela rework. That's going to be interesting to see. And then we're also having a season there where there'll be a couple different maps that are tweaked. Not necessarily a full rework, but some tweaks to maps. So really interesting to see that. What went into the decision to rework the maps that were chosen?
It's always a balance of taking a look at our current roster of maps, where they stack, how much they detract from any kind of given playlist that they're in. So Border is kind of that, it's a strong map. We just want to make sure that it's even stronger so that, if you look at it from any side, it's pretty fair. Then you have maps like Favela, which at its core, there is something wrong with it it's so unpredictable. It's just one of those things where it was a time where we were kind of exploring with what makes a siege map a siege map. And now it's kind of highlighted like, okay, this is what's not a siege map. The goal will not be to make it competitive, but the goal will be to make sure that it's fun and it's balanced and that people don't throw their hands up in the air whenever they see it. So, and between those two types of maps, we're kind of juggling production times. We're making sure that we can fit everything else in. And then the last kind of type of map we're seeing, or at least a seasonal change, is that bundle of changes. This is really the map team getting together a wish list of changes that maybe on their own aren't big enough for a season, but if we gather enough of them, they can have a significant impact on a lot of the maps that we see that you can play on. So it was really taking a step back, thinking about, okay, what's the best change for every single season, and then coming with a list like this.
What's the scope of when you say small changes to maps? What are we talking there? Like, is that the same as Consulate, where we see introduce a new bomb site? Is it moving spawns around a little bit? Is it putting maybe a car in the way of a certain spawn peak, or like is it? It's smaller things that just is quality of life changes to those maps and balancing. It's not entire like half of the map reworks, or something like that.
Like maps in Siege are wildly complex. Just like changing the structure of like the shell of a map has a ripple effect across the entire map itself. So yes, when we're talking about changes, we're talking about adjustment of props, adjustment of objective, and maybe minor adjustments of flow to an area. So it on its own, it wouldn't constitute something like Cafe, which we do think is a large enough change to warrant its own rework.
Really excited to see how that turns out. Another thing that I'm maybe even more excited about is the Gone 6. I'm going to call it the Boomstick probably for the rest of my life, but we're calling it the Gone 6. I'll be official for the podcast here. So Gone 6, it's a new, I don't know, what is it, JB? Is it a gadget? Is it what is it?
It's a sort of hybrid. It comes. So the first thing I think is we need to talk about where it comes from, because I think you guys know exactly where it comes from.
No idea.
No. So no, I'm really happy about it, because it's an idea that comes from outside of our teams, that comes directly from the community and directly from your podcast. Actually, I think if I remember correctly, you guys were discussing with Canadian, with Parker, like people from other people from the community who have a very educated opinion about the game. And you guys were suggesting this idea of a secondary weapon that could be used as a way for attackers to fight against this huge amount of utilities that defenders have. And I think it's Melo who was listening to the podcast at that time and who immediately poked us and saying, "Hey guys, I think they have a really interesting idea about like some things that we didn't think about before, but that could be super helpful." And we discussed it a lot, and it felt really like a good, super efficient way to try to fight against this. I think the part that we didn't really see before is the idea of using a secondary weapon slot. And Melo pitched it the right way to us, because he was the point he was making was basically that we already have this thing happening on defender's side with the shotguns, where shotguns are a utility resource much more than they are a fighting tool. And I think it's a super efficient, super elegant way of trying to fight against this infamous 20-second meta. So it's a hybrid. It takes the slot of a secondary weapon. It's not a pistol. Don't try to fight with it. That's not going to go well. It can be a hard choice, because typically if you're playing, I don't know, an operator that has a DMR as a main weapon, and you have this in your secondary weapon slot, you better be careful in how you take your fights. But it is something that you can use, and that is not a secondary gadget, so it doesn't take a secondary gadget slot, and you can use it to destroy bulletproof utilities on defender's side. So it's one of the many things that we're trying to push to fight against this issue of this 20-second meta.
Are you finalized yet on how much damage it's going to do? How much ammo do you get? Reload time, stuff like that. Are you like fairly certain that you have it ready and good to go?
It's getting quite close to being final. We're still having some discussions about the tweaking. We've had several pro workshops. We're trying to find the right balance. Fundamentally, I think in terms of how it feels to play with it, I would rather it having 2 ammo, but it might be too much in terms of like how much power level it brings to the attacking team and just how many resources you can destroy with it. So we're still trying to find the right balance. But we're getting quite close. In terms of damage, it's not meant to do a lot of damage in terms of either surface destruction or damage to operators. It's really meant to be destructive against gadgets.
So it's closer to Kali's secondary gadget than it is to an Ash charge.
Yes, it's a weak explosion. Exactly.
That's really interesting.
I'm super excited
and
to.
I'm just like thinking about the possibilities. I mean, one thing with this, it's kind of an indirect nerf to the operators that have secondary machine pistols, because it's a real choice for them now. Do I want to bring my SMG-11 machine pistol, or do I want to bring the Gon 6 so that I can clear some utility? You know, that
it's a good problem to have.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think that's really cool. So I'm excited to see how that plays out as well. Now, I think that at this point, you know, that's the big stuff from year 6 that really caught our interest. But one more topic that we wanted to go over here is maybe the most important thing we're going to talk about today, and that is the difficulties for new players to get into Rainbow Six. And I know that's a really big focus for you, you know, in year 6. And it's not something that's necessarily like the flashiest. It's going to be in like the big reveal and stuff. But I think that it is probably one of the most important issues facing this game is how difficult it is to get over that learning hump that we have in Rainbow Six Siege, and what we can do to try to combat that and try to, you know, onboard new players, I think is maybe the best way to word it. So do you guys, are you working on that? What do you have in the works to try to ease the learning curve for new players?
Yeah. First, I think the most important thing is to acknowledge that Rainbow is kind of notoriously hard to get into. We're really confident in our gameplay. Like once players are comfortable, once they're in a match and understand what's happening, that's when Rainbow shines. But to get to that point can be kind of unforgiving for a new player. So we wanted to, first of all, acknowledge it, make sure that we start empowering people on the team to talk about the subject and forming a cell around onboarding newcomers. And then the next steps are talking about features that can actually help out. Features like a training ground where you can actually test things out. Having a better tip system so that you understand what this operator does, how to use their gadget in which ways, and to have an actual progression for a new player to be walked through instead of kind of being thrown into the deep end without any kind of guidance of, okay, what should I be trying out first? What are the best operators? What's the best way to go about any kind of given situation? So these are really important topics that are starting to get kicked off for us.
Yeah, I mean, I can see like Flanked and I, when we started playing Siege and we ran through the situations, they actually kind of made sense back then.
And it
was like,
it's
okay,
not true anymore too.
Do the C4 with IQ, right? Yeah, it doesn't translate well 5 years later. And I've played with a few people who came into the game completely new, never touched anything. And every operator they play, you have to help them out there because they're so different. And it's not the most intuitive game to get into. The second you are in and you kind of know what's going on, it's so rewarding and it's so fun. But yeah, I really feel for people when they click launch and they don't know anything. So whatever can be done to help them get in is a good thing.
Sorry,
Yeah,
but
definitely.
you were saying it like if you have a friend, it helps so much because you have that kind of guidance. But if you don't, then you're missing out a key part of the onboarding experience. So providing some of that guidance a friend would give you is something, that we're looking into.
There's going to be people out there that are hearing this conversation, and in the back of their minds, they're getting worried, thinking that what you're saying is that you're going to make the game more beginner friendly, and that you're going to compress the skill gap and do all these bad things that are going to affect this game that they love. What would you say to those people who might have those concerns after hearing you talk about stuff like this?
It's understandable, I think, to be a bit worried about that, but I think there are no reasons to be worried. I think there are no real reasons to be worried, because chances are that right now, if you're looking at this podcast, you overcame, right? You're probably a fan of Rainbow, or at least you know about it, and you're probably part of these people who resisted to these first hours, which can be really, really harsh for people who get into Rainbow the first time. And so you're already part of people who enjoy Rainbow, and thank you for being there. The thing is, we want you to also be able to bring your friends and to bring other people with you and to enjoy. And the thing is, with time, if we're not able to retain newer players with more efficiencies than we do right now, the risk is that Rainbow gets smaller. And the thing to keep in mind is that when we make the game a bit more accessible to new players, the only thing we're trying to do is to lower the floor, but we're not going to lower the ceiling. The ceiling is still going to remain super high. The tools we're going to bring to lower the floor are tools that are useful to everyone. Alex was talking about a training ground where you'd be able to test things. When we say that, we're not getting super precise in how this is going to work, because there are many ways to do something like that. It could be different things. We talked already many times about a potential warm-up mode, a potential shooting range. Like, all of these things can be relevant. It's really a matter of how the onboarding cell we're creating is going to decide to tackle these needs and these issues. But if I talk today about a testing ground where you can test things, I don't think only newcomers need that. I think anyone in the game right now needs that right now. It's really hard to test a new operator. It's really hard to just test a gadget and get a precise idea of how it works, what's the damage range. Like, anything like that is really hard to do today. And you guys create video about the game very often. You know how hard it is with the current flow in our custom games to do something like that. So let's keep in mind that all of these tools we're going to create, they're not going to just be useful for the super... like for the newcomers. Is there also going to be super useful for our current players and the audience?
Yeah, I mean, understanding a new operator, just having a base understanding of it when they come out with a new season is a good 3-4 hours in a custom game, just trying everything. And that's a long time. If you play the game every day and you have since day one, that is a long time to invest in it with a lot of base knowledge already. So it must be insurmountable for new players when you won't even have caught up to the new operator by the time they come out. So anything done there is going to be good, and an increase in player base also gives us veterans more to play with and against. And I mean, that's pretty much only a positive.
Yeah, it's needed for a healthy game in the long run.
Yeah.
Well, what do you say we wrap up with a community questions, Ronick?
So, a thing that new players and veteran players will all have mentioned is sound. Every now and then, I know that every now and then I'm maybe a little too hard, and actually the sound was there, but I couldn't hear it over myself being a little loud or my teammates. But some other times, the sound was missing, or a little confusing, or felt like it was coming from a different place. You've mentioned that you were... correct me if I'm wrong, but repacking the audio or doing something so it was easier to find what happened certain places or fix it. But what does the future look like in terms of sound? Are you doing massive changes to something, or what's being done to combat that?
Yeah, there's a couple of things going on right there. And I think the most important is to first acknowledge that, yes, there's bugs with sound sometimes. And it's also important to acknowledge that it is a confusing, complex system sometimes for us to get a track of. At the time when we were getting all these reports, there was zero way for us to reproduce it in a prod environment, which is horrible if you're trying to kind of replicate the problem to fix it. and this goes is true for a lot of the sound problems that we have right now. So the first big thing we needed to do was to get data on what's happening with the sound when you're not hearing it, when it maybe switches sides on you. And we have changed the way that we've packaged audio. We've also started opting in players and actually, especially pro players, into collecting data logs of audio so that they can send it to us and we can actually analyze it whenever it's being experienced in a live setting. We especially benefit from pro players because they do have a level of acknowledgement when they know a sound should be there and it's not. So this is actually one of the first big things that we've been rolling out this year. On the other side is staffing up. Sound audio engineering, sound programming is a unique beast, and it needs experts in the field. So we have recruited new members to join the Siege team to tackle the data that we're getting in now so that we can start addressing all of these issues. So it's always a balance of resource management, but sound is one of the most important parts of Siege. When it first came out, it's essentially groundbreaking to break a wall and then have sound carry through walls and through floors and in a complex environment that is Siege. So the fact that players are losing trust in that system, or we're now getting bugs in it, it's a shame for the game to have to experience that. So we are making steps now to correct that, to make sure that we have a game plan to tackle any of those kind of sound bugs.
Well, that's something that I think a lot of players would appreciate, and that it's like what we talked about before, and that it's something that will benefit players every single time that they play the game. So we'll be anxiously awaiting more news on the sound. I know it's super technical and, like you said, super complicated. So I appreciate you really answering that question, and hopefully that provides some insight to the community there. So, all right, there we have it. Year 6. Rainbow Six Siege, here we go. A lot of stuff to be really excited about. Hopefully, we answered some of the questions that you may have had after you saw the reveal. And, I know that from past experience, both Alex and JB will be interacting with the community, not just here, but moving forward. So, we really appreciate you taking the time to come on. I think I speak for myself and Zeronic when I say we're absolutely honored to be a part of, the invitational broadcast. And thank you so much for including us in this. It's quite a privilege. And with that said, we will end it here. And here we go. Year 6 Rainbow Six Siege. Let's get it going.